On this week's episode of the Investors Corner, I'm joined by Ian and Mike, and we are going to give you a Renters' Rights Bill update. Now, things are moving fast. It's now at the committee stage. So what we're going to discuss is the original proposal that came in, what is being debated and what could potentially be amended, and what is coming next. So make sure you tune into this one and make sure that you subscribe to the Investors Corner podcast so you don't miss out on all the up-to-date news. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Investors Corner, joined by Ian and Mike today. How are we? We good?
Well, full of Easter eggs and all.
Yeah, I've come back a little bit heavier. But it's all good though.
Yeah, I did a 4-day meat-only diet leading up to Easter.
How was that?
Just to try and balance it out. I actually really enjoyed it. You're full all the time when you're only eating meat.
Is this the carnivore diet?
Yeah, plus eggs. And I found I was full all the time, but it's quite hard to get enough calories in when
In
you're
just meat.
In just meat.
We're
Yeah.
saying just meat, don't like no potatoes or broccoli.
Yeah, that's
Just meat.
vegetables. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just meat. But I really enjoyed it because I do like a bit of meat and very high protein as well.
Yeah, results of it? Any weight loss?
Yeah, lost just under 1.5 kilos. Not that was really an intention in 4 days. So probably mainly a bit of water loss. But I felt really full of energy and really full up all the time. I wasn't really hungry or craving anything. And I did notice over Easter, you have a chocolate egg and then you're hungry again like half an hour later. So
If anyone had that on their bingo cards to tune into a Renters' Rights episode of an Investor.
Yeah, there you go. We've done a bit of diet.
how are you going to segue that?
I
From
don't
meat
know.
to-
That was me trying, to be honest.
We'll
just
give it
to
a go.
guide it.
We'll give it a go. Right, back onto the subject. So, Renters' Rights Bill, hot topic at the moment. Hot topic. It's progressing. They're back in discussing it. It's at committee stage now. So that started on the 22nd of April.
What does that mean, Andy?
So it means that they're round a table, going through 250 pages of the Renters' Rights Bill and discussing each point and seeing if they can agree on things.
In private, with the door shut.
In private, door shut. But updates from the first meeting that they've had is that it didn't go so well.
Do we know who's on the committee?
Not a clue.
Anyone who owns a property?
Probably not.
In the whole sense of, we haven't got Kevin Hollinrake or anything on our team.
Not that I know of. I didn't
With a bit of
see
sense.
the individual list that was
Right.
attending. But I'm sure there's some people
Someone's
in there that have got a property. You'd hope, assume.
Never
Well,
know.
you just
Never know with the government.
Just a deputy
Never know.
prime minister who sold her property and didn't pay corp tax on it because she didn't understand.
Naughty.
Yeah.
Naughty.
Moving on.
Moving on. Moving on. So look, it's 22nd of April it started. They've got other meetings set up for the 24th of April, 26th of April and the 6th of May. And apparently by the 6th of May, everything will be agreed, done and dusted. And then they'll go on to the next stage, which is the report stage. Then it will go into the third reading in the Lords. And then providing that's all okay, then they'll probably make this law or look to finalise it towards the end of May, beginning of June, before they sort of break up for the summer period and then look to implement it late on in 2025. So all things going the way that they want to, it will be coming in this year. So just to recap on some of the things that they want in this Renters' Rights
I
Bill.
thought Ian was going to recap for us.
Well,
I'm going to give you my opinion on your recap.
I'm going to go through each one. I want a positive or
joke.
negative from
In joke, if
from
you
you.
haven't been listening for,
Yeah.
for a couple of years.
Main one, Section 21 evictions, so scrapped entirely. So at the moment, you can obviously serve a 2-month Section 21 notice to bring the tenancy to an end. They're looking to get rid of this completely to make it fairer to tenants so there's no fault evictions.
Yep.
Positive or negative?
Depends who for.
The landlords. Silence.
Probably a negative for the majority of them.
Yeah.
For the majority of them.
I think so, and that's what we're seeing out there, and especially with me speaking to landlords out there as well. This is the one thing that they're afraid of, and they feel like that is the biggest loss of control that they have. suppose the flip side of that is that, well, if you're renting a property and the Section 21s aren't there, well, you still can get repossession of your property if you need to sell it, or if you need it back for your own personal use or a family member. So they're really the two main reasons why you would want your property back. Okay, there might be other issues that the tenant hasn't been a great tenant throughout the tenancy. But fortunately, that's just something that we're going to have to suck up. And that's where it comes down to the relationship that you've got with tenants, and that you're keeping in contact with them all of the time, and you're creating that relationship rather than just putting them in your house and not doing anything for them, living in your home. So
is it the control they're worried about, the landlords you're talking to?
Yeah,
it feels like it's taking the control away from them a little bit.
Yeah. You know, if you've got an investment, which property is your investment, and you can't control that in a way that you want to be able to control it, then it's going to have a negative impact on things. You know, it's like investing money in stocks and shares. Well, you can pull that money out at any time and put it into a different area. But if you've got a tenant in a property and you can't control that the way that you want to control it, i.e. who's living in your investment home, then people are going to get scared off by it.
Have you seen the landlord ring doorbell viral clip that's gone around last week?
No.
This is great for this, because there's a lady that's obviously a landlord. She's come round to her property, or the tenant's property, depending on which way you're looking at it. She's rung on the ring doorbell. The tenant's out, but they've had a full conversation about the landlord saying, I need you to move out in 2 weekends' time because I've got some family coming over from Ireland.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
I need them to move into the property. And the tenant's like, well, no, it's my home. And the landlord can't get her head around why the tenant won't go and stay in a hotel, because she's like, well, no, it's my house. And the tenant's like, well, no, I'm renting it. It's legally my property. And they're having this whole ring.
That kind of brings it into the point I want to make, is it's a landlord's investment, but it's a tenant's home.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can never lump a buy-to-let investment in with other types of investment, because you're providing accommodation for someone, and that is somebody's home. A share of a business is effectively, it's in that inanimate. It's not even a piece of paper anymore. You have a share certificate. I guess you do if you run a limited company, but it's something bigger than that. And there's a balancing point of you're providing accommodation. Yes, it's an investment for you, but it is someone else's home, which is why the government are trying to do this. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but they're saying you've provided someone with a home, so you cannot physically kick those people out of the home. I've probably done, I don't know, conservatively, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 Section 21s in my career over 20 years, which I'm sort of nearing up to that anniversary. And most of them, like you say, will have been because the landlord wants to move back in, because the landlord wants to sell, and that'll be fine as long as you do sell. There's a big caveat in there, isn't it? It's not just to put your house on the market, it's to sell the property in the incoming bill. But I also feel like I've done quite a few where the landlord's gone, might get rid of that tenant.
Yeah.
And I've tried to talk them out of it, and they've gone, nah, they're just a bit of an arsehole.
Yeah.
Which they won't be able to do anymore.
No.
Because being a bit of an arsehole isn't on that list.
Yeah.
of good reasons to evict a tenant. And quite often, if someone's an arsehole to you, it's because you've been an arsehole to them. I'm going for a record of certain words said.
He's going.
Need to put the exclusive box on this episode.
Didn't realise I was going to say it so many times.
How chocolate affected mine.
I feel like a lot of landlords give notice as a retaliation, which I know you can't do retaliatory evictions, but it happens. Not always because of maintenance, but because of friction. And that's what's going to be affected here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so important when this comes in, because inevitably it will. It's so important that the tenant sort of referencing, selecting stage is taken like so seriously now.
It's the selecting, not the referencing.
Yeah.
Referencing is great, but
yeah,
there has to be a bit of human
big
sort
time.
of common sense. And if you've got a corporate letting agent that's really trying to drive their deals home at the end of the month, and they've found a tenant that might be suitable on the 26th of the month. They need the deal in. They're trying to kind of get that deal wrapped up together. And you're the landlord using that agent because they're the big corporate in the area. You could really come unstuck with your property. I like what you said there. It's a tenant's home. People do see it as an investment, but you have to look at it slightly different. I mean, we're sat above 3 retail shops below us that have been vacant ever since we moved in 2 years ago, because they are let to the co-op, and the co-op doesn't want anyone else that's got any link to their business profile to move in
or takeaway or
it's
whatever.
their right to make that decision. So now the local community are, and we're only in a village, are kind of 25% down on the amount of shops in the village because the co-op are calling the shots. But ultimately it's their right. They've got the 10-year lease on it. They can kind of do what they want. So it's the same example, from a commercial point of view. You have to be very much aware of that.
Yeah. Let's get on to the next one. No more fixed terms. So all tenancies to be rolling from day one. So this is something that was talked about at the start. Looks like that is going to come into play. They have tabled an amendment, but I can't see that amendment going through. They were quite clear that they wanted this. They wanted to allow flexibility for tenants not to be locked into a long-term contract, not to be locked into if their personal circumstances change where they need to go back overseas or something like that, then they don't have to pay any, early termination fees or rent until new tenants come in. So they're pretty set on that. So the flexibility is there for them, but obviously the flexibility is not there for a landlord because you've got certain grounds to only serve notice. But tenants can do it for whatever reason.
I think in a roundabout way, this serves as a benefit to the landlord because a lot of tenants that do want to leave inside the fixed term is because they're concerned they've lost a job or they've split up and financially they're no longer able to pay. The couple, for example, have split and one person's income's on it and they want to leave because they can't afford the rent anymore or they don't want to pay for the rent anymore. So I actually think in a roundabout way, this will actually protect the landlord because it means the tenant might be in there for 3 months. Previously, they might have had to be in there for 12 months and they're trying to make it work and they end up falling short on the rent. This way, they can turn around and just say, look, the best thing is I move out, you re-let it to a tenant that can afford it because I've split up with the missus or I've split up with Mr. or I've lost my job or whatever it may be. And it actually keeps it a little bit cleaner for the landlord.
That's what I say to clients now is that, if we've signed a 12-month agreement and the tenant needs to go somewhere or they can no longer afford to pay the rent, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep the tenants in there and risk there being more arrears on the property, or do you just want to remarket and get new tenants in and allow them to go on their way without any complications? So that's what we do at the moment. Obviously, other agents look at it and think, well, it's fixed term contract, tenants are going to stay there, and you get some landlords that are pretty hard on that, but those are the landlords that suffer in the end because they've got no flexibility there.
The flip side of this, and I'm not saying it comes true, because in the real world, regardless of changes to rules and regs, people don't read them, so they never really get any bite. But there is a risk that this allows tenants to absolutely play the system. Now, famously, we talk about this pretty much every week. My house refurb. I've got no kitchen at the moment. It's a bit of a pig with a family. It's running over. I'll just go and rent a house for 2 months. Screw the landlord over.
Well, does this eradicate short let agreements?
Well,
because you're paying a premium for a short let. You don't.
Why would I? I'll just go and pay market rent for a 3-bed semi round the corner, and after 1 month, give the landlord notice, stick 2 fingers up, and move out. And now my kitchen's in because I couldn't afford to go and rent. I couldn't find or afford a 12-month rental on a property because I didn't need it for 12 months, and no landlord was giving me a 6-month tenancy. So I stayed put in the house, and we've grinned and bared it, and hopefully we see the end without divorcing. But that does leave the door open.
Cross fingers for the divorce or not the divorce? Which way round was it?
At this point, it would not make financial sense. Too late.
She doesn't watch this episode.
No, we're way into it. Should have done the first 5 minutes. Don't click this, Austin. I will fire you. But that's where I think that's what I would be concerned about the landlords. I've got no protection. What do you mean I'm walking into a 1 month tenancy? And it goes back to what Ian said before. Tenant selection is the only important part here. And I'm never doing a let only again. So I'm not paying a letting agent a month's rent plus VAT to find a tenant for them to walk out in a month's time.
Going back to tenant selection.
Tenant selection.
How would you select a tenant if all of these came into play? What would you base selecting a tenant on?
Conversation with them and reading between the lines, checking social media profiles, looking at where they work, what they do for a living, what their address is, what their property situation is, the whole holistic package of who those people are.
So if you've got landlords working with agents are going to have to, do you think agents are going to have to change their way of when they take a tenant on a viewing and the way that things are referenced? Because referencing agencies won't do the social media stuff.
No, not at all. That's not the reference agent's job. They're there to check the credit.
So do you think the agent now needs to change their way of approaching things?
I've always done that as an independent. But again, I go into an agency. I used to work for an agency where the office would let 90 properties a month, and you'd have people doing viewings and other people putting offers forward. So that conversation and that nuance gets completely dropped. That if a tenant offers on a property and they earn $100,000 a year and they work at Microsoft, the offer gets accepted. Now it's the tenant's offered on the property, they earn $100,000 a year, they work at Microsoft, they live 10 doors down, and we've just seen a planning application go in on their property, and they're the owner. That's a short term. That's where we go. That's a short term tenancy. Do you want a short term tenancy? Or we've got these people. One's a teacher. One works in a charity shop. Their landlord's given them notice because they're selling. Their kids are in the local school. They're earning half the money, but they're a far better tenant because they'll serve you for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years until they have a life-changing event like an inheritance, which allows them to buy something. Which tenancy would you like, Mr. Landlord? That's what you need to know.
Yeah.
I just thought of a.
I thought you'd fallen asleep.
I
saw his brain going when I looked at him. I thought there's something ticking in there.
I just found like it just created an unbelievable bit of tech for when this comes in.
Great news! Don't tell anyone. We'll get.
Yeah,
subscribe to the channel. I'll release it as something. is million maybe billionaire tech. It's unbelievable. I'll talk to you about it off camera.
What? It will never. Just for the viewers, it will never work.
On the tenant selection. I would also get people to start thinking about it like when you recruit a member of staff. Poor managers or poor owners of businesses recruit staff on CVs, and great ones recruit them on good questions asked in an interview. And this is very much the same from a tenancy point of view. As a letting agent, you should have a set of key questions that you want to ask a tenant before they're looking to move in. So at offer stage, you need to have some key questions. And I'm not talking about tick box stuff that you need for referencing and for AML and that aspect of things, just for general kind of GDPR. This is actual proper questions that will give you these answers. And it's very much the same as when you're recruiting for a member of staff. It's the conversation that you have in the first 10 minutes will dictate whether you're going to hire them or not. But how you ask those questions and the questions that you've got in your locker that you ask will dictate whether you hire the right person or the wrong person. So many people I've seen over the years look at a CV. They've already offered or refused a job before the person's even walked in.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with a tenant. You need to be able to ask really good questions to get really good answers to then make a really informed decision of which tenant you would recommend to the landlord. Because ultimately for us as letting agents, we are being asked for advice here. And we're being asked to
put our paid for.
Yeah. And it's really important that we get that part right, because otherwise we're potentially at fault for the decision that the landlord ultimately has to sign on the tenancy agreement, really.
Do you think we'll see more landlords wanting to meet potential tenants without just taking the agent's word for it? And the reason why I say that is because I've had two landlords.
Don't trust their landlords.
I've got two landlords recently where we fully manage the property. No, and they're saying to me that, look, totally trust you. That's why we've gone with you. But we just want to put a face to the name and just meet the people that are going to live in our family home. And they set up a Zoom call, or they'll go meet face to face at the property. But it seems to be happening sort of more recently than before.
I think there's a different reason for that. I think landlords are so paranoid that they've been set up as some sort of fat cat billionaire, that they actually want to meet their tenant just to show them that they're normal people and they're renting out their family home. And it means something to them rather than it just being some faceless corporation type situation. So the tenant actually has some empathy with them as well as them have empathy with the tenant. Because the press will have you think that landlords are like the absolute scum of the earth, when 99% of them just aren't. Well, 99% of them are people like my mum, like...
Yeah,
who just wants tenant to enjoy the flat.
There's no awkwardness, is there? If you put face to the name, then you sort of think that you know that person.
It becomes Gene and Steve, not landlord, which is a weird medieval word.
It's a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah. I shared my tenant leaving or me evicting my tenant effectively the back end of last year on an episode where I was horrified that the local council had almost suggested to them that they should effectively stop paying rent, force me into serving them notice, taking it to court so that they could get the social housing that they were looking for, which was, for me, like baffling that we were going to be in that situation. But had I not, a year before that, maybe 18 months before that, when there was a leak in the kitchen, and I said to the tenant, I'll swing over and have a look at it because I can't get anyone out this evening, just to get an idea from my own perspective. And he was in with his daughter. And I said, I've actually got my daughter in the car, so I'm just going to swing over and have a look at it, take some photos and send it to the contractor, almost just to sort of pacify peace of mind. First time I'd met him. Now, I went over to that flat. I was there for about half an hour. He made me a glass of water. The two daughters were kind of sat on the sofa, sort of chatting and whatever. And we built a bit of a bond, and we shared mobile numbers, etc. at that point. But we built a little bit of a bond off that connection of being there that half hour, and our kids were there, etc. I don't think if I hadn't have done that, and then subsequently after that kind of gone over and visited them, that a year and a half later, when the council said what they said to him, I don't think that whole situation would have unfolded in the favourable way that it did for me in the end, because he felt, I explained to him, I said, look, that's going to basically stop me being able to pay my mortgage for a year if you do that. Let's try and work on flexibility and finding you a private property. And so happened 2 months later, he found a private property. But I don't think if I had that relationship with him from that meeting, that he would have been so keen to do that, because he didn't want to shaft me.
Yeah.
And I think if we hadn't have met face to face, or we hadn't have known who each other were, it was just text message conversation and phone calls, that would have unfolded in a much more negative way.
Do you want to shaft your landlord? Do you want to shaft Ian? No.
Yeah.
Is the kind of way for that. So I guess that's why those landlords want to do that, and that's fair enough.
Okay, next one. 1 month's rent up front, so no more upfront payments. So if you've got tenants that come in from overseas, or potential tenants that don't pass affordability, what they would do is offer sort of 6 months or 12 months rent up front now. And you won't be able to do that with what they're trying to do. Now, in my opinion, this is going to have a negative impact on some potential renters, because the people coming from overseas, say they're coming from Hong Kong where they've got no employment in the UK, well, the process is to get 12 months rent up front. So the landlord's got the security there of the rent being paid, and that continues throughout the tenancy unless, they've got a job in the UK and they can demonstrate that on the renewal of the tenancy. And it's the same with people that are slightly under affordability, or they might not be employed currently. They might have just sold their family house. They're now going into rented for 12 months. The affordability doesn't cover, but they want to take some of the proceeds from the sale of the property, pay the rent up front, and not worry about it on a monthly basis. And the landlords accepted tenants in that criteria. Now, with them getting rid of upfront rental payments like that, landlords are going to turn away from these applicants, because there's no security there, right? So have they created a damaging effect to potential renters rather than offering renters protection on this clause?
Just thought of another piece of tech.
Ian,
Yeah.
we've given Ian 2 business ideas that are going to make him a billionaire.
It's going to solve the rental market.
Yeah.
I don't really get it. In complete honesty, like if a tenant wants to pay a year's rent in advance, or they see it as a benefit to pay a year in advance, then surely that's great. But then if you're going to break tenancies down to monthly tenancies, you can't pay a year in advance. So it's like it's all just disconnected, and it makes my head hurt. Like,
feels like they've gone a bit too far on this, because there was
again, it's a working thing, isn't it? It's like loads of time, me and you probably 1,000 times in our career, where a tenant's gone, I've just sold my house.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the money into whatever, but I can offer all of the year's rent in advance if it's of benefit to the landlord.
Mm.
You know, so does this work mutually, especially when interest rates are pretty good, before the 2008 crash, and probably now, where you can get 4.5%, 5%, 6% on your savings in some cases. A tenant might be like, well, it's 15 grand for the year. If I offer him 15 grand, he can either plough his mortgage away or he can put it into a savings account and make a little bit more. So everybody wins here.
Yeah.
I never really got why that's a problem.
How are they going to enforce that?
Don't know. I think it's more a case of that if an agent demands it or puts it in a way that the tenant has to do it and the tenant doesn't agree to it, they can report it.
Yeah.
And basically the agent gets fined for it.
So
that's the only way.
This is an estate agent policing situation.
Yeah.
So what about private?
Who knows? Again, a tenant could shop the landlord, couldn't they? And say, I really wanted this property. There's no reason for rent to be paid up front, or the landlord's demanded it. He's advertised it as rent paid up front through open rent.
Right, and then stuff it.
I get if the landlord's demanding it, but normally it's the tenant that wants to offer it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I mean, I suppose what they're trying to get away from is that not all agents do it, but some agents do it, where the landlord is insistent on that he wants the rent paid up front. And then if they go on to any viewings or anything like that, then they'll put it in a way that the tenant must pay rent up front, even if they were to pass the affordability checks or the referencing checks. It's just a requirement that the landlord's got. So it's still the landlord demanding it, but the agent is facilitating that on behalf of the landlord, where now it's not. You won't be able to do it.
I think it should have been probably used in a slightly different way, which was if the tenant wants to pay the year up front, they get half a month's rent discounted, for example. So
or it must be held in a secure client account.
Yeah.
The flip side of it, I was just thinking then, is it does protect tenants in the kind of fraud situations, which I read about all the time, of how fake landlords renting houses. They just go and Airbnb a house for a week and rent it out 3 times to student tenants quite often, or HMO tenants, and then they go to move in and it's like, nah, what are you doing? You haven't rented this house. That person's long gone. In which case you wouldn't pay a whole 12 months rent in advance, so your losses minimised, but
because there's no fixed terms though, you can't pay up front because there's nothing to pay up front, is there? You can only ever pay 2 months up.
Yeah,
what we're going to see is we're going to see more sort of guarantor products out there, where the tenant, especially if tenants coming from overseas,
some sort of insurance,
they're going to have to pay for an insurance policy of this, which is normally, probably about $1,000 for the term of the tenancy to have a rent guarantor. So you're incurring more costs on a tenant to pay, which is what they've sort of brought the Tenants Fees Act in, so tenants don't have to pay extra fees. But now they're saying that tenants going to have to pay, or some tenants going to have to pay a fee to have a rent guarantor product in place for a tenant, for a landlord to then accept them as a tenant. So really, it's just created something extra, an additional payment that the tenant has to make.
So basically, letting agents are having to do more work but can't charge admin fees. Tenants are having to pay an increased admin fee, but to an insurance company rather than the lettings agent who don't have any of the work to do.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
It's really worked. Again, the agent's been shafted. Violin strings everywhere, but Yeah, I can see the frustration.
There you go. I think that they'll do some sort of change on that, because you've seen articles out there from tenants personally saying that this is ridiculous. They're going to be affected by this because the reason why they're able to get the properties that they want is by offering this rent up front, which they're happy to do as a tenant. They're not being forced to do it. And now they're saying that that's going to be completely taken away from them. So with that side of tenants arguing about it as well as landlords, then I think that there'll be a slight change on that. But we'll see. Probably not, but we'll see. Rent bidding banned. So must accept the listed rent. No competitive offers allowed. Well, if it's the listed rent, then why should a tenant pay more than what the property's advertised at? So they're saying that a tenant can't offer you £100 more a month, or you can't sort of get into bidding wars with tenants saying, can you come up by an extra 50, whatever it is. It's just got to be at the listed rent that it was online. Any problems with that you see?
Yeah.
Hundreds.
It's just bullshit, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not how business is done in the world of demand and supply. It's just a ludicrous clause that just goes against everything of the way the world operates.
It's going to lead to people overpricing properties.
Well, that's what will happen. The properties will just
Everything
go on
will
for
just be £5,000 a month.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to offer what you think it's worth. But my experience of the last 5 years is I go to a property which I list at £1,500 a month. I show a tenant round and they say, can I pay 16 for it? I don't prompt the conversation. Tenants prompt me with, yeah, look, I see that it's busy out there. Can we just lock this down for 16 because it seems like a good price to me. I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
And apparently that's going to be a breach of the law. So as an agent, do I diligently just go out and price that house at £2,000 next time and see what happens? Or do I get the offer of 16 and then just change the asking price?
Yeah.
Or I just don't get it, because like Ian says, demand and supply says, and pricing of a property is totally subjective anyway.
Yeah.
What my version of a £2,000 house might be different to yours. It's what a tenant's willing to pay for something, and I get people think that rents have got out of control. Hard lines is rents have gone up slower than inflation over the last 5 years. If you want the stats, we've got them. Especially in the southeast, rents have dropped over the last 2 years. They're way below inflation. It's just a case that they took a fast jump when supply was low. Now everything's fine again. The government are catching up way too late and dropping in silly rules that don't actually fix a market.
Yeah. Well, if you take a 2-bed apartment in the southeast, which, if one came onto the market, probably get £1,500 for it, but there's probably 20 inquiries that come in on that property. So the landlord knows that there's choice there. So again, if you can't accept anything above the advertised rent, well, the landlord's just going to go, oh, well, if you're going to get 20 inquiries for that property because you told me that they're in high demand, instead of 1,500, let's whack it on at 1,700, because those inquiries, 50% of them turn into offers anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just going to have a negative impact on the rental prices, because people will be listing for more rent than actually what it should be.
Yep. It's just going to cause problems.
Yep. Rent increase limits. So rent increase every annual only. Need to serve Section 13 notice. It can be challenged at a tribunal if the tenants don't agree to it. I mean, my thing on this is that, okay, well, rent increase annually, that's no problem at all. If you've got the comparables on what that property is worth and what others are going in that local area, you can demonstrate that to a tenant, then there'll be no issues in regards to agreeing a rent increase. If you've got landlords that are expecting that their property is worth £500 more a month than what it was compared to last year, well, those landlords are just living in cuckoo land, really. Anyway, so those are the ones that are going to get caught out by it.
This is just another opportunity for tenants to find a loophole. Again, I know I'm an educated individual, but if I'm in the position where I'm a tenant and my landlord whacks up the rent, I'll go, no. Let's have the tribunal. How long do you reckon it's going to take to get to a rental tribunal?
Yeah.
It's going to take years. And I'm just going to sit there at a lower rate.
Yeah.
I just, again,
I mean, it comes down to the relation.
Again, you've got me before I got to the point. But the relationship is the relationship. Like, if I'm having if I have friction with my landlord, I'm going to go tribunal. Then that's fine.
Yeah.
Even if I know they're right.
Well, you would, because you've got no relationship there, right?
Yeah.
You just know that you can potentially get away with it and just leave it there for a year or two without the rent going up. But if you've got that relationship with the tenants, and again, it comes down to it being sort of evidence backed. You know, one thing that we do if we're dealing with renewals is that we'll get sort of comparable properties and say, look, you're on 1,200. There's other ones going on at 1,275. Yours is in better condition. The landlord needs to increase the rent so it keeps up with the market, but she's only asking for 25 quid a month extra.
Yeah.
So you've got a better property. You don't have to worry about moving. Other properties within a quarter of a mile of where you are going for more. What do you wanna do?
I do think with this one, 98% of everything stays the same.
Yes.
What they're basically doing is they're looking at the issue that happened a year or so ago, where interest rates rocketed and landlords were effectively saying, well, my mortgage has gone up by £470, so I'm just passing that on the rent. So that's the 1% on one side that they've basically gone, that must stop. Your 1,500 flat where it's rented for 1,400 and he's got an 800 quid mortgage on it has just gone up to 1,150. And he's just said, well, actually, after tax, this, that, and the other, I need to put that up to 1,600. They're just putting a stop on that 200 quid increase by putting this clause in play. And the other 1% on the other side is from the tenants that are kind of effectively saying no to something when it's reasonably, looked.
Yeah, the horse is bolted though. Yeah, so that's been done.
It is old news, but it's caveat to that. And it will come round as logic. I mean, at some point, it's going to go the other way. There'll be the drop in mortgage rates and it will go the other way. And we might see it go back up before it goes back down. But at some point, it's just seesaw.
Yeah.
Again, as a landlord, have your property for 10 to 20 years and just mitigate the cycles by, not living the life of Riley when it's down and being a bit shrewd when it's up, with your finances. That's just part and parcel of owning property.
Yeah. Let me quickly whiz through the amendments that are being proposed.
I'm excited for these.
All right, so we've got some amendments on the table that they're trying to implement, but like I said, whether they do or not is another story, but we'll find out soon whether they've implemented any of them. But first one, fixed term tenancies back in. So landlords will still be able to offer fixed term tenancies up to 12 months with the option to extend after 4 months. This is a reversal of the original plan. So they're looking to go back to fixed tenancies for 12 months.
That's just as normal then. That's just what it is now.
Student tenancy exception. So student lets can remain fixed term to avoid disruption to the academic cycle, which apparently is sensible and welcomed by
it's ludicrous to have these rules for student tenancies, because if you only do a 1 month tenancy for students and they clear off,
what they originally said is that
even the years planning.
Even if you can't find tenants for those type of properties, what they're originally saying is that landlords will never have or could potentially never have a period of where they struggle to find tenants for those homes. So it's like your 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom apartments that rented to students. Well, they could easily be filled in with professional couple.
What about your 5 and 6 bed HMOs that are all around every university in the country?
They originally said that you could easily find people to rent those rooms or a family to rent that property in the interim if you can't agree
in the interim, but you can't then move them out to relet it. So
they said
it's not an interim. You can't rent as an interim as a landlord.
So they said that you could potentially get a short term let
basically
to those
saying
properties.
Student lets is your A plan, but if you don't get your student let, you can't kick off at us because there's a B and the C plan. means your yield just declines, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Then again, it goes back to your financial planning. You have to plan for a plan B if you are going to let, with student lets as your primary.
Yeah. Small landlords can keep Section 21. So landlords with fewer than 5 properties may still use a Section 21 for now, giving them some flexibility. But again, it just comes back to that. You've got Section 21. You haven't got Section 21. Some people can use it. Some people can't use it. But they're
And how does a letting agent know if a landlord owns?
Well,
or
you
less
just don't,
properties?
do you?
It's like,
I mean,
how do I? They go, yeah, Mike, serve Section 21. Do you own 5 or less properties? Absolutely, Mike. Can you prove it? No. I've got nothing. I just got no energy for it now. I'm dead.
Yeah,
I'm out.
it's a bit crazy, isn't it? It's either you get rid of it or you keep it. You can't just keep it to certain types of landlords.
If your first name is before A to M, you can have a Section
I can
21.
probably
If
tell
it's
you now that
M to Z, you can't.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll probably tell you now that probably won't make it in to the renters' rights because it's
Just goes
just
back
ridiculous.
on the top points, like we just.
Yeah, exactly. Possession grounds to all be discretionary. So your mandatory grounds are, let's say, tenants in 2 months arrears, or you want to move back into the property. These are new ones with the Renters' Rights Bill, or you want to sell your property. So they would be mandatory grounds. But now what they're saying is that they want all of that to be discretionary. So a judge will now have discretion on all grounds. So the judge can decide whether they give you the property back or not. Now, the only issue with this is that, well, you've got different types of judges out there, right? So one could say one thing, another one could say another thing. There's no precedent set on anything because they're all discretionary.
And the biggest issue is you can't get in front of a judge for a year plus. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the judge being the person to make the decision.
Yeah.
It's too slow.
So again, that's
They want certainty. I've only been to court a couple of times in my entire career, and one of the times it sticks with me that the judge literally asked the barrister that I'd employed what the law and the rule was, and then acted on it because he's a county court judge. You can't, as a county court judge, know every law on everything. But he was like, right, you're a barrister, you tell me, what do I do in this situation? He said it, and the tenant's jaws just dropped to the floor. They were like, oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, so how a judge is supposed to use their discretion? Like, it makes their job impossible. It's like saying a GP has to do all of the work of every doctor in the hospital. They can't.
Well, just come back to there will be no consistency with it because everyone will have a different opinion on it or a different opinion on what they think is right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, well, they need to get the courts.
You're taking away black and white and just adding grey. Yeah, it's not going to help anybody.
Exactly. Rent in advance U-turn. So a new amendment which allows up to 12 months rent in advance if agreed by both parties. So what they've gone completely the opposite on what they originally wanted to do.
On the way out.
Yeah, it's just back and forth, isn't it?
You can't have fixed terms, but you can if everyone agrees you want fixed terms.
Yeah.
That's basically what happens now.
And then the landlord gets their rent, you move out after 3 months, and then you've got to try and get the landlord to give the rent back, basically.
Yeah, good luck.
So yeah, nonsense one, really. Index-linked rent rises. So for the first 4 years of a tenancy, rent rises will be index-linked to inflation, not market-driven.
So they're going to go up faster than they do already.
Yeah.
As proved. If you want the 20-year data, you can have it off me.
Mike,
if you
is
do
the
that,
stat man.
Rents will go up higher and faster than they have done over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So
the years that we had where we were seeing annual inflation at like 9-10%, tenants are going to really find that a bit of a wallop, because that's quite a chunky amount. To be honest, again on that, I know it will see rents rise on a long-term basis. That is the fairest way to do it. That is the only way you can
do it. Well, it fixes it, but it creates another problem.
It does,
but it doesn't just allow the market.
It creates a black and white fairness where it's not dictated by a letting agent, a landlord. It's dictated by inflation, which is a fair way to do it. But I wish Rightmove would do the same with their bills. Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah.
18% doesn't seem to match the 2% inflation, but hey ho.
Yeah.
Let's get the.
Can you imagine if the rental market was like right move prices?
Send Labour an
inflation
email and
rises.
see if they can have a chat with them.
Yeah.
Tribunal powers on rent reduced, so tenants can still challenge rises, but tribunals can't lower the rent anymore, and no automatic delays if an appeal was lodged. Something new there. Yeah. It's not a juicy one, that is it? Guarantor restrictions. New rules proposed to limit when a landlord can ask for a guarantor, possibly restricted to higher risk situations. Well, that's
Why you
sort of
asked
pretty
him in
standard.
the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
No landlord asks for a guarantor just for a laugh.
So that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, well done on that one. And that's it. So they're the main amendments. So garbage.
There's a load that they've got, and then on the revised potentials,
just undo it.
They're trying to
counted
YouTube.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So well done, the government on that. So
Ian, are you interviewing Kevin Hollinrate next week?
I've interviewed him.
Oh, too late.
Yeah. I mean,
I wish you could have just asked those questions because he's a guy who understands the property market. I'd have been really interested to know.
he's a really good guy that we could potentially get on here. To be fair, it might need to be Zoom because he's up north, but we could potentially get him on this episode to talk more from a landlord point of view. But I spoke to him from an agency point of view. Very insightful. He's quite controversial in a lot of the Labour policies as well that have come into play.
Yeah.
But good guy. I mean, in summary, back on the episode, we'll keep everyone updated on this podcast because it's important for people to try and have a bit of strategy and planning around it. But that's why we're doing it, because a lot of people will look at this stuff and they won't be able to translate it. And hopefully that's what people have found in this sort of 45-minute episode, that there's a bit of kind of thought process and translation going on. But we'll just keep people updated. And if anyone's got any questions for us directly, just pick up the phone, call Avocado, call Andy, have a chat with him. He's been the guy that's kind of, sort of translated it for the last year plus, maybe 2 years on this show. So if you do have questions, just pick up the phone and speak to him, and we'll obviously offer our advice where we can and just stay on touch with it. It is going to dictate and change the way that landlords let their properties, whether it's their property, whether it's an investment, whether it's in a company name, a personal name, all of these things. It's going to have a big impact to your strategy. So pick up the phone, have a chat, and obviously we'll be back with another episode very soon.
Cue the hokey cokey music.
Any little teasers to who's up next?
Teasers. We've got a landlord coming on. Actually, he was an electrician. Went into property. Had 4 properties. Now he's gone into property sourcing. So he'll talk about his sort of journey within property and how he made that by juggling a full-time job, family. We'll be talking about mindset, motivation. So it's going to be a good one. Awesome. Next one.
Look forward to that.